What's going on, guys? My name is Richard. Welcome back to another Stock Market Outlook video sponsored by MarketSmith. And you might notice I'm not in my usual studio. This is actually the hotel room down in Orlando. I'm here for the FFTY conference where I'll be presenting tomorrow. So stay tuned for that recording if I can get my hands on it. And if not, I'll make a whole new video basically presenting what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. And in this video, as usual, we'll talk about the market indexes, leading stocks, my watch list, how it performed this past week. And we'll also talk about the IBD Big Picture article, sentiment, and finally the GMI Signal from richardlmoglen.com. And if you do enjoy my analysis, please go ahead right now and take just a few seconds to leave me a like down below. It really helps me out and my channel. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one every single week. So going into this week's action, you can see that we had a strong rally to end out last week, but then we had an immediate kind of expectation breaker. And from this bar, the real expectation for me was that we continue on down to the 200-day or even the top of this prior consolidation pattern on the NASDAQ composite. However, we kind of stuck it, and growth stocks acted pretty well on that day even, as well as the next day, starting a rally into this week. And really that action was supported on this day where we had negative action at the beginning, but then a very, very strong close, followed by a gap up, which did not close super well. And then Friday, obviously, we ended right at the lows. But so far, there are select names holding up super well, and we'll go into those in this video. And I think the stocks that are holding up really nicely right now and showing a lot of relative strength could be the leaders going forward once we finally get back above the 21 EMA, which so far has been resistance on this index. So going over to the S&P 500 as well, this paints a pretty similar picture. You can see very similar action, strong rally on this Wednesday, gap up, not a great close, and then ending basically at the low of the day, although holding an inside day here, and we're just below that 21 EMA. So I'm a little bit suspicious of this market. Some stuff is acting really well, especially if it starts with an A. That just seems to be the case. AEHR, AMBA, apps, APP as well. But a lot of stuff needs a little bit of time to develop a proper setup and basing structure. So I'm not in a huge rush to get super long and exposed in this market at this point. However, those are kind of the kind of large cap indexes. They're dominated by Apple, Amazon, those huge names, mega caps. But if you go to the IWO and IWM, this is Russell 2000 growth. This is a little bit stronger, although once again, not a great close today, but it's holding up a little bit better than the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. And looking at the IWM, this is very similar to this chart, holding above the 200-day moving average, and all the moving averages are kind of converging at one point. So it actually gives me a little bit of confidence here that these small caps are outperforming a little bit because they have been consolidating for basically the majority of this year. So we'll see what happens, whether stuff falls through to the downside, which is basically the expectation after today's close, starting next week, or if we see stuff firm up and a lot of setups to emerge. And in terms of what I'm doing in this market, I've played some select names, AFRM, apps, AMBA as well, and gotten some nice profits out of that, but I'm not super long at this point. I'm still a little bit cautious here, but we'll see what happens next week and whether stuff really firms up and we get an explosion in terms of breadth. But that's a quick run through of those main indexes. I also like to cover the FFTY, the Innovator IBD 50 ETF. This really shows you the destruction that's happened in a lot of growth names. You can see a pretty large meltdown, failed breakout here back to 200-day moving average, and then poor closes Thursday and Friday. So really the expectation is we continue lower, and this definitely looks a little bit like the left side of a base to me, and essentially just looks like it needs a little bit of time to firm up before potentially starting another move upwards. But I'm a little bit disheartened by this failed breakout. It was looking pretty promising, and then obviously this correction happened. But stuff will set up. We always have to be ready for the next uptrend, and all we can do is kind of keep stocks on our radar that are showing relative strength and are setting up proper bases, and just basically do your homework and be ready for the next opportunity. So that is a run through of the major ETFs. I also want to touch on a few different stocks here. AEHR, for instance, I know Ray caught this one. I didn't trade this one, but a super powerful move. Oops reversal here on this day, and then a great breakout through the HVC on this Thursday, and then obviously up super strong today, up 16.69%. So super powerful move. This is a smaller cap name. Not much fund sponsorship just yet, but the price is really what's special about this, the price relative strength here. And this is actually on my radar, even back here where we had a monster push up on the highest volume ever, and then a nice base right here. So definitely want to watch to see if there's some type of pullback consolidation other potential entries into this name. Some other stocks have been acting well. Apps, for instance, you can see progressing well, broke out through this pivot. I would like to see a little bit more of a drift down here, but definitely you could have caught an early entry through these highs, and it's also a 2-2 reversal through this prior day's high, and you can see it's stalling right near the 80 mark. So I wouldn't mind basically inside day here, and then attempt at that pivot breakout on volume. APP, if you just take off the S, also is acting super well. The highest volume since the IPO at this moment, and nice fall through as well. So definitely want to watch going forward as it tries to take out all-time highs near 90. And finally, another stock I wanted to highlight was Tesla, which is still setting up under this pivot here. Let me go over to a weekly chart. You can see there's a pivot right at this level. It's actually a 3 weeks tight at the moment. So showing some relative strength, certainly given the market pullback here. And going back to a daily, you can see that it's just kind of consolidating here. I don't like these downside wicks, but if you can hold up under 800 and hold above the 21 EMA, it's definitely setting up for a potential move and potentially a move up towards the top of this prior base near 900. So those are a few stocks that I thought we'd go over. And now let's move on to the rest of the potential true market leaders here in TC2000. So starting things off, we've got AEHR, and this actually wasn't an oops reversal on this Monday, but did find nice support near the 21 EMA, 2-2 reversal on this Tuesday. And then if you draw a DTL here, that's also a potential entry. It's a good confluence here of those different setups, and a super powerful push here on volume on this Thursday, and a gap and go on Friday. So one to watch for sure. So definitely very early on with this name, and we'll see if it forms up other bases and other opportunities to enter. AFRM, also a super strong name here. Great volume push on this day. It coincided with, I believe, news that was partnering with Target, and also took out all these pivots to the upside, and is super strong, holding up right below all-time highs given the market weakness. Take a look at that relative strength line, even given the market pullback. So I think this is pretty much the TML at this point, and I'll be watching to basically add to my position here. I've kind of actively traded this here. I got a nice push on this day and also on these days right here, but great volume indicators here, highest volume ever here, as well as on this day, and recently on this push upward. But I would actually like to see some type of consolidation here, maybe for 1 week, and then an attempt at the all-time high pivot. And moving on, we've got LC, which has been holding up really nicely. Not a great end to the day on this Thursday. It was up about 10% at some point, but nice upside reversal off the 21 EMA area. This could have been an entry point on this Friday, and definitely showing RS into the end of the day because of this strong closing range relative to the indexes. But I like how it's holding this anchor VWAP. If we go to a 65-minute chart, you can see it's touched that about 3 times, and looks like people are basically accumulating right at that level. So maybe if it pulls back once more, back to this level, that could be something to watch to see if there's a basically constructive intraday setup off this anchored VWAP. Moving on, we've got NET, which recovered strongly this week here after kind of melting down a little bit on volume, but nice push on volume as well into all-time highs during a correction. This is, once again, one of the leaders in the market, and it's acting super, super strong. No super clear entry point here. You've got a 2-2 reversal as well as taking out these highs on a gap and go. But most likely, if you weren't watching this very closely, you might have missed this push up, although you do have a nice recovery red to green move on this Wednesday through this close, which could have been actionable as well. App we already covered, really nice action, highest volume since the IPO week, looks strong right below these all-time highs. UPST recovering here and trying to hold above the 21 EMA, and a nice end to the week on this Friday, although it's kind of stuck below this anchor VWAP from the highs at this moment. Apps we talked about already, nice push here, and decent end to the week as well, setting up under the 80 mark. Netflix, nice RS relative to the other large caps. RS lines in a nice uptrend at this point. U also recovering really nicely, undercut and reclaim of the 50 SMA, and a 3-bar break to the upside, 2-2 reversal on this day as well. Dash holding that 50 SMA, not super strong on these 2 days. BNTX just kind of breaking down here, kind of a bear flag, not really on my radar at this point, and actually take it off the list of leaders. SE holding back above that 50 SMA and most likely the 10-week line as well. It's just below it at this point, but nice action on the weekly bar. Team, you can see, is holding the 21 EMA. It continues to trend nicely and hold key moving averages, but it did break the 10-day for the first time a few weeks ago, and not a great end to the week, although on lower volume. PLTR, you can see they sold the gap up on news here, but so far it's sticking close to that high volume close, although it finished the week below it. So not really on my radar at this point. Tesla acting strong, as I mentioned, just basically consolidating right above this pivot here. Moving on to NVIDIA, you can see it was rejected at the 21 and 50 SMA at this point, although not huge volume on this decline on Friday as it basically tried to fill out this gap. Zscaler back above the key moving averages, although it just finished right above the 21 EMA and back above the 10-day as well as 50 SMA as it tries to form out a base here and consolidation. DDOG holding up decently above the 50 SMA. AMD, nice oops reversal and bullish outside day on this Wednesday. This would have been a great entry point here, a gap and go here on Thursday, and an inside day to end out the week. Bill, you can see holding above the key moving averages, forming out a nice pivot below this level, 282.85. Moderna, similar to BNTX, just kind of in a little bit of a downtrend below the key moving averages at this point. CMG below the key moving averages as well. DOCN, nice action on this day as well. Oops reversal, as well as a 3-bar break to the upside. And if you're wondering what I mean when I say oops reversal, I've made an entire video about that setup. Definitely recommend it. It's a great way to manage risk. And I'll have that link down below as well as popping up on the screen right now. Snap also acting decently well, not a great end to the week, but above the moving averages at this point. Dexcom below the 50 just barely, but holding these weekly lows. Domo just looks like it's basing at this point. CrowdStrike also looks like it's basing. Fiverr also basing, but it's interesting because it's pulling back on not huge volume back into this high volume close, so definitely a spot to watch this stock. DLO looks like it's forming out a longer term base, although you've got a pivot here, and we'll have to see whether it can retake the 50 SMA next week. AMBA acting well, except for this Friday, a little bit of a downside reversal on lower volume, but still pretty negative price action, basically giving back the gains of this Thursday. ASAN also trying to build something here, nice action on this Wednesday, but also not a strong end to the week, although holding above the 21 EMA. S just building out a base at this point. GDRX, pretty volatile action here, back below this pivot, which isn't a great sign, but so far it is holding the 200-day simple. FIGS just kind of basing here back at the bottom of this base, so maybe it forms a low cheat through 38 or so. SQ, really negative action on this Friday, back below all the key moving averages. DOX looks like it needs time. You can see pretty high volume on these negative down days. GLBE also looks like it needs a base here, undercutting this prior pivot. In mode, pretty volatile action here, although holding back above the 50 SMA. SPT, big downside reversals these days with basically no support on higher volume, so it looks like it needs to form out a base at this moment. And you've got Skin also negative action on this Friday. And finally, we've got Crocs also looks like it needs time to form out a base, but we'll have to see whether it can recover that high volume close. So on the bottom half here, you've got a bunch that look like they need a little bit more time to form bases, but you do have some showing relative strength, especially AEHR, AFRM, LC, NET, all those top names. And once again, if you just sort by weekly change, that gives you a great list of leaders to go by, and that's a great way to screen for relative strength. So let me know your thoughts on these charts, and let me know any stocks I should add to this list just down below in the comment section. And then moving on to my previous watch list, let's go ahead and talk through these charts, the ones we haven't already covered. ABNB holding up pretty well, back above the 10-day. Not a great close this day, but you can see pretty low volume on this almost downside reversal. And I would like to see it stick above the 21 EMA going into next week. AFRM, very strong. We already talked about it. AMBA as well. AMEH, just really breaking down, never really offering too much of a setup. Not a great close on this 2-2 reversal. And definitely you would have gotten stopped out on this day on Wednesday. As we talked about, acting pretty well. Bill holding back above all the key moving averages, pretty good action. And you can see it's just below the 283.85 pivot, as well as this high volume close, and that's at 283.98. So definitely a level to watch. DOCN, we already covered. GDRX as well. Same with GLBE. HUD acting well, and SI is another crypto name to really have your eye on here. There was an earlier entry down near these kind of pivots at around 120, but it is still below these all-time highs. So if it sets up a little bit of a handle, definitely want to watch going forward. And I'm actually going to add this to the leadership list because it's a clear leader at this point. Going back to these charts, HUT is acting well. You can see back above the moving averages and good action and end to the week on this Friday. LC we already talked about. Netflix also holding up well. We already covered that. Skin downside reversal here. Tesla we talked about. Uber above this pretty key level, the green line here, which is the IPO high. So that's really strong action and definitely a leader going forward. So I'll actually add this to the leadership list as well. And finally, we've got Weber, which after the strong move up, pull back to 21 EMA, but I really like the action, although on lower volume, to end out the week. So overall, pretty good week from my watch list. AFRM was a standout here, up over 20%. Great setup here off the 21 EMA and basically an inside day and up. This is kind of my go-to, a strat reversal or some type of entry point off the 21 EMA, leader that's already been showing accumulation and super strong relative strength. So make sure you guys tune in tomorrow on Sunday when I'll be posting my next list of ideas. And moving on to sentiment, let's start with my Twitter surveys. And basically this is unchanged, still a little bit high in terms of percent bullish, but nothing too extreme. And going over to name exposure next, this really shows that there's a lot of fear when it comes to hedge fund managers. This is still pretty low at around 68.6. And I like the very significant drop all the way basically from the 90s down to 55 in just a few short weeks. So this is pretty promising here. And looking at the Bulls versus Bears poll, this is really good. There's a lot of fear in the market in terms of this sentiment indicator, and we'll have to see whether these cross anytime soon. And now moving on to sentiment, let's start my Twitter surveys here. And we basically are unchanged from 50.1% bullish, now 50.7% bullish. But looking at the name exposure index, I really like this drop to 55, and even 68 is relatively low here. So there's definitely some fear in the market. And looking at the Bulls versus Bears poll, this gives you a lot of confidence if you're kind of bullish as a contrarian indicator, because this is a pretty steep fall here, and we'll have to see whether these cross anytime soon. Maybe if we get one more really big flush and really kind of reset everything. And also taking a look at the put-call ratio, this is pretty much in no man's land, but in terms of sentiment, you definitely see a lot of fear coming into the market. Moving on to the IBD Big Picture article, the headline is stock market drifts lower after jobs data, 10-year yield extends gains. And reading through, they discuss a decently strong action on Friday until the final half hour. And also they mentioned how the 10-year treasury yield hit the highest level since early June, which could be a negative for growth stocks. Overall, they discuss the action of the indexes. Stock market today, FFTY down 1.4%. And this is basically because of INSP in mode and SPT dragging down that overall index. They also discussed the September employment report, which missed expectations badly, only adding 194,000 jobs when the consensus was 475,000. So we'll have to basically wait and see whether that is incorporated into a taper decision. And also they discuss how the XLF, the financial sector, outperformed, which isn't usually a great sign for growth stocks, as well as oil and gas names down here, also adding basically gains after recent breakouts. So overall, their current view is still a market correction. And going over to the Wishbone blog, the current GMI signal is still red since September 22. And on Thursday, the GMI score was a 2 out of 6. So overall, my view on the market is pretty much unchanged. Market in pullback mode at this point. I'm not super exposed at this point. I'm kind of taking my spots, looking for opportunities like AFRM, which is clearly standing out the crowd here, but still being a little bit cautious, although we are in a potential rally attempt at this point. So overall, I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know your thoughts down below on this market. I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you guys in future videos. Thanks.